20 years ago, Sally Fields starred in Not Without My Daughter, a movie based on the true story of Betty Mahmoody and her daughter Mahtob. Betty was married to an abusive Muslim husband who prevented her and Mahtob from leaving Iran. Now Mahtob shares their ordeal in her book, My Name is Mahtob, and how she learned to forgive the father who shattered her life. What was life really like for you? What was your family life like at home before you went to Iran?
Before we went to Iran, we had a really happy, typical Midwestern family life. My dad was an anesthesiologist at the hospital, and my mom stayed home and took care of me. Then she worked, for a while as a receptionist. And so my parents, they were such good parents. They spent so much time nurturing me and teaching me. We spent a lot of time with other families and really became family with them, all these friends from all over the world. And so even though I was living in a small town, it was still a pretty culturally diverse experience, but very typical.
And you were a bit of a daddy's girl at that point.
I was very much a daddy's girl. Yes, I was very much a daddy's girl. I remember sitting at home, and I remember him reading medical journals. And I remember sitting on the floor with the old journals, cutting out organs. And he would say, okay, cut out all the pictures of the heart. And so not like, the heart, I'm looking for the organ and snipping it out and things like that.
So there came a point when he told you and your mom you were going to take a 2-week vacation back to his homeland, back to Iran. And when you got there, though, you realized that it wasn't quite a vacation. Tell us about that and what happened once you got there.
So for the first 2 weeks, we didn't know, and it was a celebration. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, the night before we were supposed to leave, my mom was packing, and he came into the bedroom and said, we were in Iran until we died. And from that moment on, he was a different person. So in my mind, that's when my dad died. He changed so completely that it was like he disappeared.
And you even said in the book that there was a specific day that you just realized your dad was a monster. What happened on that day?
It was that day, the day he told us we couldn't come home. That was the first time I saw that kind of, he was violent and he was aggressive, and he had been this lighthearted, charismatic, social, gregarious person, and now he was just so hard and icy. And I say that he changed so much that even the sound of his footsteps changed. They were all of a sudden deliberate and angry, and I was afraid of him.
And speaking of that fear, your mom was afraid of him too.
Yes.
From what I read in the book. The two of you decided that you would escape because there was no other way to leave. He was trying to send her back without you, but she would not leave without you. What happened? How were you actually able to escape?
Only by God's grace.
Yeah.
That's the short answer, and that's the whole answer. But even in an environment where we shouldn't have been able to trust anybody, where the government hated Americans, hated the American government, and there was so much distrust, in society, God still put people in our lives who saw what was going on and wanted to help. So people that we didn't know, complete strangers, risked their lives and their families' lives because they didn't want me to grow up thinking all Iranians are like my dad and his family.
Yeah.
The man who finally did help us escape, he worked very hard. It was 18 months before we were able to escape, and the only payment he wanted was to know there was a smile on my face.
Wow.
I mean, just the kindness of strangers, and God put these people in our lives to help us.
When you first got back to the States, did you feel like you were free from what you experienced in Iran, or were you still afraid of your dad and what he might do?
We definitely did not feel free. He swore that we would never escape, but if we did, he would spend the rest of his life looking for us, and he would kill Mom and take me back. And I had heard many times, I'd heard him say, how he was going to kill her, and that we would never see each other again. And so I was, in my mind, as a child, it was a foregone conclusion that he would kidnap me again. And that's why I was so appreciative to have the opportunity to learn God's word. I mean, in Iran, we prayed before I went to Iran. Mom was a Christian. We had other people, and there were other people in my life who shared their faith with me. And but after our escape, I was at a parochial school where we had memory treasures. We got to memorize Bible passages and hymn verses, and I just soaked these up because in my mind I knew it was inevitable that I would be back in Iran one day and I wouldn't have the Bible. And so I was going to take it with me.
You just talked about your faith, and I'm sure that played a huge role in where you are today. One thing you say at the end of the book is, "Now I am free." Were you able to forgive your father? And what role did your faith play in you becoming free?
I was able to forgive my father. I'm so thankful that God put me in the hands of these loving, nurturing adults who took the time really early on after our escape to help me come to terms with this, to help me learn to forgive, to help me learn what is forgiveness. The first time I learned the story of Joseph, I related with him because we had so much in common, but I could not understand why he would forgive his brothers.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense to me. And so, I mean, what a blessing that God put me in the hands of these people to teach me these lessons. And so very early on, I would say within the first couple of years, I forgave. And at the same time at home, Mom was working really hard to help me remember and celebrate the good in this Persian heritage that will always be mine. And to remember that my dad wasn't entirely a monster. There were times when he did monstrous things, but he loved me. And I still have zero doubt that he loved me. So I think forgiveness is a gift from God. Being able to forgive is not in our human nature. And, so that's, I'm very thankful for that gift, for being able to forgive, because without that, I would never have been free.